Fab.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of the disaster area that's the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour. I say disaster area because the Archons again attacked us earlier on when we tried to go live earlier on. But at the moment, my wonderful guest, Ñancy Dean, is now looking very, very stable. And I mean that in the nicest possible sense. Just to explain, Ñancy, I've known Ñancy for probably 14 or 15 years, I think, a long, long time. And she contacted a long time ago, but the first opportunity I had to meet her was this Thursday when I did an event in London, and we had a readers collective get together of people that were interested in my work, and we met during the afternoon, and that early evening I then did a talk at Watkins Bookshop, which Ñancy was part of the audience and everything else as well. But having to get to know Ñancy a little bit, her work is extraordinary. Not only is her work extraordinary, but she is extraordinary. I keep finding out things about her I didn't know, like she's a pilot. You know, you're going, right, what is there any end to this lady's talents? So without further ado, Ñancy, welcome to the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I've been really excited to be part of this. It's a big honor.
Oh no, the honor is all mine. The honor is all mine. I genuinely know that some people are talented, some people are hyper talented, some people are phenomenally talented, and you're one of those. Now, I just very much like, just very quickly, for you to explain a little bit about your background and how you've become the exotic individual you are, with all your multifarious interests, from astronomy to clothes design to everything. So a little bit about that, and then after that, if you can explain a little bit of how you came across my work, because I'm intrigued by that as well.
Thanks very much, Anthony. That's really, really kind. So I come from Southeast London. I came from a working class family. I went to a Catholic school. I'm not particularly religious myself. And I think all my endeavours are possibly a manifestation of a bit of neurodiversity, a big love of novelty, a general intolerance for the mundane, and maybe a natural lacking of serotonin. But I also feel that romanticism is necessary for people like me to get by in a world like this. I'm just a very excitable person, I think, and anything I like to try and get involved in as much capacity as I can. And I'm so coming across your work, that was, yeah, maybe around 2008, like you say. There was a channel on Sky TV called, aptly named Controversial TV, and you were on the programme with Theo Chalmers, I think it was called On the Edge, and you were talking about your book, The Daemon, and I found it absolutely fascinating. And from there, I Googled your work, and I found you on Facebook, so I wanted to keep in touch with your continued work. And thank you so much for all the content that you've been putting out all these years. It's been brilliant.
Thank you very much. I mean, it sometimes can be quite stressful, as you've suddenly discovered today, but I feel that the message has to be got out there in some way or another. And funnily enough, one of the things that I was discussing with Graham Nichols before the event, Graham is somebody that's been on this show before, and we were both discussing why we do this, and it was quite intriguing because it clearly is not for the financial benefit, because there's very little financial benefit to be had being a writer these days, unless you're super successful, and very few of us are. And then you think, well, do you do it for fame? And you probably don't do that either, because that's not really what you want at all either. And it's just sharing your ideas, and this is without any kind of point of vanity or anything. It's just, we are enthusiasts, just like you are with your music, and we're desperate to get our ideas out there in a way that people can relate to in one way or another. Because as you know, in my talk a couple of days ago, I said that the term Geworfenheit, the idea that we are thrown into life, we don't make a choice on it. It just seems it's a concept by Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher. But it's the idea that we just dropped into this body. We don't choose to do it, and we just have to go with the flow. And some of us accept it, and some of us spend most of the time questioning it. And I very much feel that you are somebody that is very much questioning your experiences and trying to explain your experiences through your artistic forms, your various artistic forms. Now, I know you've had a series of interesting and extraordinary experiences in your life, so maybe we can dive into them a little bit and then come into your art from that.
Yeah, 100%. And I completely relate to what you say with regards to doing things out of love and passion rather than fame. Yeah, I have, and a lot of your works, as I say, I can relate to, a few of which I don't know where to run with them, but for instance, with your Damon work, I suddenly recalled as a child that I had a lot of my memories as a child, maybe up until the age of 4 or so, I seem to recall as viewing from a sort of bird's eye point of view. And I think you discussed that somewhere in your work, but also they must have been dreams, but they felt extremely real. As a child, I remember being in the living room with my brother. We share the same birthday, but there's 2 years apart from us. So I don't remember much life without him. But I had these extremely vivid recollections, which sure must have been dreams, where we both had a twin. So there were 2 of us. And they were so intensely real feeling. And yeah, I
Can you
think
tell us a little bit about, so you were very young and you had these dreams that both you and your brother both had twins.
Yes.
And you had like doppelgangers of yourself. Could you remember any of the dreams you had or communications you had with these twins?
Well, we wouldn't directly communicate, which gave a slightly eerie feel to them. But because they were us, it didn't really feel necessary. It was almost as if it was an instant telepathy. Yeah, and I had them quite frequently, and I suppose they must have stopped, I don't know, around age 4 or 5. But I found that very curious when I think about your work. And they aren't really of all the strange things that I've experienced in life, I don't very often think of that at all, because there's not much more I can say or run with from them, I think. There are more obvious odd stories or experiences I've had, such as witnessing what I think, or what would be classified maybe as poltergeist activity, as well as a very strange video I once had.
Okay, well, first of all, going on about the childhood entities that seem to manifest within childhood, there's a guy called Halliwell that wrote a fascinating book, and he came up with the term quasi-corporal companions. And the idea that young children, their brains are more open to a greater perceptual universe. And whatever these entities are, they can come through and children see them all the time, and people jokingly say, oh, they're mythical friends or anything. But there's more than this, because it's so extraordinarily common. And I wonder whether it is to do with the myelination of the neurons in the brain, that effectively, because the neurons of young children aren't myelinated, that they can pick up more. Or conversely, it could be something to do with the corpus callosum, the thing that holds the 2 sides of the brain together in children, where again, it is not as highly developed. So it's as if you have what I would call access into demonic consciousness, additional consciousness that you have. And poltergeist activity links into this as well. So could you tell us a little bit about what that was all about, particularly because I know there's a number of my friends who've also, when they were children, witnessed poltergeist activity, and they're very similar personalities to you. So I'm just intrigued as to what is happening here. So if you can explain a little bit about your poltergeist.
Sure. Well, I should have specified really, because any poltergeist activity that I have been witness to wasn't in childhood, but in adulthood. So on one occasion, I was in Belfast at a friend's house, and I had lived with them for a while, so I was very comfortable with her family. And me and her dad and her brother were all in the living room, and my friend was upstairs and her mother was upstairs, and we were just watching television. It was around Christmas time, and in their living room they have a fireplace, not a real one, and on either side of the fireplace were these big heavyweight cones, these red glittery cones. And if I can grab something to maybe demonstrate how this cone, there's nothing around me that I can use, but these big heavy cones, one of them on the side when, no, hang on, bear with me.
When searching for
So
cones
here
come
we
to
are. I've got a little candle, so it went, imagine that's the floor, and it went like this, it went, and then it just stopped. And you know, there was no draft. A draft couldn't make that happen. Nothing had fell to hit it. And I just, there's not much of a satisfactory end to this experience, but I just turned to the dad or the brother and I said, did you see that? And they both responded with yes. And they didn't really, I could be wrong, but they didn't strike me as the sort of people who would maybe entertain conversation on what it was. And when I call this a poltergeist experience, I'm not 100% in saying that. I'm just saying it resembles what people classify as a poltergeist experience, because very much what I admire about your work, Anthony, is how rational you are when you approach these topics. And, you know, there may well be an explanation that is not very obvious at all. But at the very least, I enjoy the entertaining aspect of it and the wonder of what the hell this phenomena is. And so we didn't converse any further about what it was, which leads me to wonder, and I've never spoken to either of them. One of them is sadly passed now, but I never spoke to either of them about it since. And it makes me wonder, was this a regular occurrence in the house? I never raised it with my close friend because I didn't want to spook her. But Belfast, I mean, if we're going to go down the route of haunted places, I would say Belfast is quite a pained area. Not that this action was particularly scary or evil feeling. It was just very strange.
Because this is one of the things, isn't it, with poltergeist activity, it seems to be quite spontaneous, and it seems to be odd when you witness it. I've never witnessed it, but I know people who have, and it seems to be almost a manifestation of intention, as if we can manipulate the environment by our own thoughts or feelings. Many ways. Now, one of the other areas that I know that you've experienced in the past, which is again a great interest to a number of people who watch this podcast, is about astral travel, how the body experiences these type of things, and also phenomena such as sleep paralysis and things. And again, are these areas that in your life you've had?
Well, in terms of the idea of astral projection, I very much love the idea and am very inspired by the whole concept. As to whether it's truly a thing, or as to whether sorry, I'm losing my words. Let me see. I'm not sure if I've just had very intense lucid dreams, and if I'm honest, I'm more inclined to go down that route, though I very much would love to believe that astral projection is real. So let me see. Yeah, when I first became aware of it and became interested, I had read that a gateway into that was through lucid dreaming, but I'm not solidified in thinking that they're separate things. I'm not sure. So I always could lucid dream since I was a child, but around the age of, I suppose I was 18, 19, well, it was 2012 anyway, and I decided to get into dream recall for the memory benefits. And I mean, for me personally, dream recall is absolutely incredible for improving memory. And
can you tell us more about that then? What exactly
yes,
that process is?
so I found through dream recall, the amount that I could suddenly recall. So I'll just explain first of all what of course it is. You wake up, you write down whatever dreams you had, as much as you can remember. And you'll find, at least for myself, very quickly you start to recall more and more and more. And within a week of starting this practice, I was recalling 12 different dreams, or what I perceived as 12 different dreams, you know, taking part in different places, different people, different situations. And the amount that I was recalling, it was just, I just didn't have the time to write it all, and I fell out of the loop. But my memory in waking life became so sharp, so I really should try and bring this back into my life, especially being a student again now. So if anybody is looking to improve their memory, I massively would recommend taking up dream recall. But anyway, I found that the dreams were becoming more vivid. I was obtaining higher levels of lucidity, and once I had that, I would try or generate this experience of leaving the body. And I didn't get very far. I suppose maybe I'm one of those people who perhaps were fearful of it. Let me see. I have one recollection of a place that wasn't like where my body was, which, you know, makes me think that wasn't really an OBE. But there was one other where I left my bed and I flew, I suppose, out to the what do we call it? Where the banister was, the top of the stairs. And I didn't get very far. I got around there and then I went back in. And just because of all the time it was taking up in my life and things having higher priority, I didn't pursue it much further than that. But I'm very much inspired by the whole astral projection, astral plane stuff. I mean, I have a song called Astral Plane.
Exactly, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. I'm now really intrigued by this. So your lucid dreaming experiences, can you explain to the people that are watching this how you define a lucid dream, how you just define what you mean by a lucid dream, and how you experience them personally?
Sure. So a lucid dream is a dream where you are conscious that you're dreaming. And there was a great chap on YouTube who has a sort of club now. I think Jade is aware of him. His name's Rhys Jones. And he would talk about different levels of lucidity. And so you might, for instance, be aware that you're dreaming, but you might not have the power to control what is happening in the dream. So that would be a higher level. And I would have varying degrees of lucidity. And it would often save me from nightmares as a child, where I could wake myself up. I think most people can do that. But often when other people tell me about these nightmares they have, I'd think, why didn't you just wake yourself up? But we don't all have this ability. And
So when you're lucid, you know you're Ñancy. So you're in a dreamscape, and you know who you are. And presumably you're also aware that you're dreaming. So you know you're in a dream. And that means you're in the circumstances whereby, rather like in the movie Inception, where you can start to manipulate the environment around you. I mean, have you ever found that happen to you, that you can play with the environment and make it malleable?
Definitely. It's one of the things that are so appealing, I suppose, about lucid dreaming. Somewhat going on a tangent, but I'm quite a fan of several video games, and I'm really into fantasy video games, and the landscapes are so beautiful and fantastical, and a lot more attractive than, say, where I'm from, where it's very much a concrete jungle all over the place. So I would love immersing myself in environments that would resemble these landscapes. I'm sure Sarah James probably speaks a lot about the benefit of lucidity and dreams and altering things. I would, enjoy flying, enjoy lots of hedonistic activity. But these days, if I'm to return to it, I might try to use it more for revising.
Because again, moving back to your experience of what we would probably call a classical OBE, because there's great debate and great arguments, and there's been a lot of really famous OBE trainers and OBE writers on this podcast over the years. And this big debate is, what is the difference between a lucid dream and an out of the body experience? And I know people like Robert Wagner, who's been on this show, who's the great lucid dream expert, would argue that a lucid dream, you just become lucid. So you're lying in bed, you're dreaming, and then suddenly you find yourself somewhere else. So there's no kind of transition out of your body to the location where you have the lucid dream. You just find yourself there. Again, my favorite term, the one, Geworfenheit, you're thrown in to the lucid dream in a particular location. But your out of the body experience, there was a transition, wasn't there? You were in your bedroom and you felt yourself coming out of your body and manipulating and walking around what we generally call consensual reality. So you were outside your body within the environment that you can because it was the hallway of the second floor of your house. And the question then is that you remembering or trying to think what it would be like to be wandering around that area? Or is it something that you feel that you were physically out there? Do you remember, do you think that was it a dream, or do you think you were actually outside perceiving as it was at that moment, your outside environment?
It's really hard to say because it was very much, so my perception of the hallway was matching the time of day that I was asleep. And my mother's bedroom door was open, which it was at the time. I mean, I don't know that's not any proof at all. I'm more inclined to believe that it was a dream, but I love the idea and I'm open to the possibility that these things occur and are not dreams, but are going on. Yeah, I think that answers.
Yeah, because there is so much evidence of veridical out of body experiences whereby people go out of body and bring information back. My $1 billion question is always the amount of people that turn around and say they can do it automatically. And if they can, it should be the easiest thing in the world to go into the next room, read a 6-digit number that's there and then come back again. But that rarely happens. And in my research into out-of-body experiences and delving into some of the famous cases that supposedly were veridical OBEs, there are a lot of question marks about them. And it would be wonderful to find ways and means. And in fact, in a few weeks' time, I'm meeting up with a good friend of mine, Jürgen Siever, who is a German out-of-body experiencer. And you need to check out the work of Jürgen, actually, because you mentioned about you like computer games and the beautiful graphics that you have. He's also a digital artist. So what he does is he goes into out-of-body states and then brings back the information he sees from the out-of-body state and creates the virtual realities based upon what he sees. So this is an interesting kind of feedback mechanism. Now, I've always happy to argue that if you consistently go back to the same place in a dream state, that suggests that it has quasi-independence of you. It's part of your memory, but not. And again, there was work with people like Rory and Citing came up with something they called a metachoric model, that in fact, it's a creation of your mind, but so is reality anyway. The reality we think is external reality is just as much a creation of the mind. And that kind of segues perfectly on, because of course, your interests are very scientific, aren't they? I mean, you are a very active amateur astronomer, and I'm right in saying you actually work in various astronomy locations around London, such as Greenwich.
Yes, Greenwich, as well as the Society, the Royal Society, and I'm hoping to work in other places too in the future. There is in your chat with the chap last week, one of my concerns with these things is, snobbery in the scientific communities, where if you dare show any interest or give any time to anything a bit offbeat, you're immediately classified as, you know, woo or a loony, but really this goes against what science is really about, and being open to other possibilities, etc. And at the very least, enjoying ideas for the entertainment they provide. I mean, all the things that you talk about, Anthony, all the things we're talking about today, they're fantastical ideas, brilliant. Yeah, so that's sometimes a concern of mine.
Well, it is, isn't it? It's extraordinary within the astronomy community. And I listened recently to an interview you did in an American podcast, which was great fun, where the guy was confusing astrology with astronomy.
Yeah.
As well, which was intriguing in itself. And I do recall him asking you what your favorite constellation was.
Yes.
Which I think technically you said was not really a constellation, but the Pleiades, which is probably
yes. It's actually an asterism, and when I listened back to that, I kicked myself.
It is inevitable. Whenever you're live, I always kick myself all the time, because you say things because, you know, you're in a flow, really. But the Pleiades, even as a child, is one of those kind of things you notice in the sky. And I used to spend hours trying to attune my eyes to see something of the Andromeda Nebula, the Andromeda Galaxy, just, you know, to kind of see it if I could. And I was quite surprised to discover many years later, you know, the actual size of the Andromeda Galaxy in the sky is much bigger than you think. You think you know, it's larger. It's just because our eyes can't see the light as it's coming through. But again, you know, astronomers, you know, you go into the higher levels of astronomy. You know, we have the great mystery of the Big Bang. We have the mystery of hyperinflation that took place immediately after the Big Bang, which of course we can't understand how the hyperinflation happened. Then we have the idea of virtual particles coming into existence. We have the mysteries of black holes. All these things, the mysteries of dark matter, dark energy, and these guys exist within that world, but still in denial of the mysteries. It's odd, isn't it?
It's very odd, and I think maybe I'm being a bit reductive, and I'm sure it varies person to person, but I think it's more of people protecting their I think it's a bit egotistical, and they're just, I don't know, want to sort of suggest that they're too clever to entertain mad ideas or something. I'm not sure.
And yet, the same token, they believe in virtual particles that flit in from nowhere, exist for a ridiculous amount of time and disappear again, purely and simply to accommodate what is observed. And these are just as much hypothetical as everything else is, you know, virtual particles, you know, it's very, very strange, the problem they have. They're in this great state of hubris, I think. And all of them, you know, as I was discussing in a previous show, you know, you sit down and have a beer with one of them afterwards, and they'll turn around and you wait for it. You wait for, I don't agree with anything you say, but I did have this strange experience once. And then you say, why don't you talk about it? And it's academic tenure. It's their pension. They want their credibility. And it's only after that they've had that. And, you know, I would imagine with your experiences, it must be fascinating, because astronomy is the most amazing. You look up at the sky and it just makes you feel there's this extraordinary sensation, isn't it?
And you're looking into the past with the time that the light comes down. I mean, I can just never, when I think of the Big Bang, I know it sounds so simple, but how can something come from nothing? I'm just not satisfied by it at all. I accept it, and it's fine for working with, you know, but you can't, something cannot come from nothing.
Yes, you know,
and I don't believe in an end or beginning of time, because time doesn't need anything to be at all.
And of course, you know, you look at Einsteinian physics, you know, the idea that time and space are the same things. You know, they're elements of the same thing. We have space time, and we have block time of people like Minkowski, and we know that the cosmology, you know, is as near as a fairy story as anything else is, because what they're doing is they are observing things, then trying to build up models from the observations, because they can't do empirical studies in the same way that a physicist can. in the same way, because they can't. They've got to extrapolate back, and it's intriguing and it is fascinating. But then moving on now to the other area of your career, your music. And your music is not just your music. The one thing that I discovered about you only a couple of days ago is your the work that you do with kind of circus type things with hoops and everything else as well. Can you tell us, how the hell did you get into that? How did that happen?
Well, I'd always been very fond of the idea of circus. I mean, it's beautiful. It's you're awestruck at the things that people achieve when they really dedicate their lives, I suppose, to certain skills. Like riding going on a unicycle by their head or whatever. And I don't do anything as amazing as that at all. But I always very much like the beauty of circus and the variety and the danger element, I suppose. And as a child, it wasn't circus, but there was a program called Sky Dancers. And I think that must have stuck with me a little bit, because so with my discipline being aerial hoop, it's as close as you can get really to sky dancing. And I always love this idea. And I think that bleeds a bit into my flying as well. But I remember as a teenager being invited to a circus show, and I'd never seen aerial hoop until that instance. And I remember watching it and just thinking how beautiful it was, and thinking, why couldn't I do that? And a few years later, when I started working and bringing home a wage, and I had a bit of money to part with, I discovered, very luckily, actually, in the building next door to me was this organisation called Aircraft Circus, where they taught circus arts, and it was brilliant. So I just paid for a course, and I had consistent training for a few years, which I very much regret has become intermittent now. But I did have a period of going around with artists, performing at different festivals and events. And fortunately, I'm in a position where I can continue with that now. It's my favourite way to keep fit, as they say. I love the artistry.
Yeah, because it's also, you've got to be incredibly brave, haven't you? This is dangerous stuff. This is not like dancing. It's something really extreme.
And so, of course, there are safety measures imposed, like in the classes. Of course, we have crash mats. There are trained riggers. A rigger is somebody who controls the height and the position and the movement of the hoop. You don't necessarily have a rigger when you're training, because you have it tied to a point. And health and safety is absolutely massive, because if it goes wrong, of course, it can cost lives. And the actual head of where I trained, she broke her neck twice. It's amazing that she is still alive, and she's incredible. But I, as a child, was always very, very timid and very, very cautious and very, very anxious. And I think that actually serves me very well in something like aerial dance, because building up to any move where there's an element of risk is a very slow and very calculated journey to minimize as far as possible, which is quite odd, because I'm actually very impulsive in other ways. But yeah, that's odd. I've not thought about that before. But I don't dive into these things, because it's very obvious and very painful if you're going to do something wrong.
So when you're doing this form of your art, I'm probably using the wrong term here in terms of choreography, but do you do your own choreography when you're doing these things? Do you decide, this is what I'm going to do for this particular performance, or do other people design it for you?
So with all my performances, I've had yeah, I've never had to, the only instance where I've performed choreography that was someone else's was during class with a teacher. I was quite fortunate. So my first show was the Greenwich Circus Festival in 2015, and a bunch of us collaborated. We were given the theme of the show. It was the Snow Queen, or is it the Ice Queen? I can't quite remember. And my role was the fairy that leads the human child into the other realm, and I was allowed to construct my own choreo. I suppose some of that was based on my ability at the time. Unfortunately, when I would do shows with independent artists going to different events, I would perform what's the word? Intuitively and not anything planned. I forget the word. What's that word? When you, yeah, when you just make it up as you go along. Never mind.
Ad-libbing.
Yeah, yeah.
So do you then, because, you know, as well with your music and your singing, do you incorporate this circus ability within your normal performance as a singer?
I have done. It depends on the facilities that are available at whatever space I perform in. I've not nearly as much as I would like, but it's something I'm going to really try and make happen in the future. I actually now have my own freestanding aerial hoop rig, which I hope I'll be able to bring to different venues in the future. But I have had, you know, ideas of performing whilst aerial, and I have done that a couple of times, but I would love to do it with a live band, because so far it's only been to my track playing. Something for the future that I would love to do, for
I suppose
sure.
the difficulty is, isn't it? It's your breathing and it's your ability. You're actually physically moving as well, and that's the challenge, because it's going to take it out of you. And listening to your music, your range seems to be extraordinary in terms of high and low notes that you can hit.
Thank you very much.
And are you trained as a singer, or is this something that you have just acquired naturally?
I never had voice lessons. I just, since I was in school, I loved hymn singing very much. It was, I don't know, I'm an intuitive singer, I suppose. I never had lessons. Though in the past people assumed that I had classical training, and I suppose maybe that's just coming from the way that you maybe sing in school and in churches and things. Yeah,
because I remember my mother was a trained opera singer. She never actually performed opera, but she was trained, and she used to explain how you use your mouth as an echo chamber, and how you project, you know, which was extraordinary how she could do that. And it clearly, you can be trained to do these things, but you still have to have that ability, for want of a better term. But your ability is your music as well. Your music is very intriguing and very interesting and very mysterious. It's as if the persona of Nova Halo, which is your persona, is not you. It's another version of you. And of course, what I love is your aesthetic. It's the way in which you, because you're also a clothes designer, so the overall image that you have is absolutely extraordinary. You know, and I've seen the photographs, and it's incredible. And it's as if you have all these incredible skills that are coming together in this amalgamation of something that is really quite incredible. So who are your musical influences? Again, you know, are you just spontaneous, or are there certain artists that you think, no, that's really who I'm basing myself on?
I have a very broad range of inspirations and loves in music. I think good music is good music regardless of what genre it is, though there are certain genres I like more than others. I have a very but before I answer, I always find it very curious to hear what other people think I sound like, because it's often not who I've had in mind or thought of. So I enjoy Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I was massively into him for a very long time, and don't think my stuff is anything like his. I love Grimes. I love Demis Roussos. I love Vangelis, Aphrodite's Child. Got those three connected.
Aphrodite's Child, 666.
Yeah.
That's Vangelis and
Demis, yeah.
and the Warbling Tent together, wasn't it? And that's
Yeah.
70, 71. Extraordinary.
Yeah, I love the Walker Brothers. I love Jeff Buckley massively. I love the Chili Peppers. I love Nirvana. I love Jane's Addiction, and I really like a lot of Japanese pop from about 15, 20 years ago now, I suppose. There was one lady called Olivia Lufkin who I very much like, and she had moderate success being involved doing the music for a TV show, but she was quite obscure even in Japan, and I very much like her. Who else? I love Prince, all kinds of music, all kinds.
When I saw you, I was reminded of the performer Lena Lovitch, who
I think I've heard of, I'm sure I've come across her, but I can't.
Similar
I'm
image
sure.
to yourself. And then there's Marta Sebastian, who was, I think, Hungarian, who was very interesting as well. And I think it's maybe it's your vocal inflections that make it interesting, but you're very much your own unique voice. And I think that, and it's because of your image, there's kind of image, Kate Bushy kind of feel as well. But it's very, very powerful. And I strongly advise people to check out your work, because it is at the start. And I think that you are really creating something very, very interesting here. And I do wonder, because there seems to be suddenly a group of musicians involved in my work at the moment. Over the last few weeks, even, there's been more musicians coming in, and we're very much moving these interviews to almost music as well. It's almost as if we're running in parallel now. So there's musicians who have had extraordinary experiences. So we're bringing the two together. Now, I'm aware of us running out of time, and it's sad that we lost the first 15 or 20 minutes, but I'm sure there's going to be people out there. I really want to check out your work and everything else. So how can they check out your work? What's your website? And by the way, your website is extraordinary.
Thank you very much.
And everything else. So how can they check you out?
Okay, so I would suggest www.novahalo.co.uk. That's Nova as in supernova, and Halo as in angel. You can also find me on Instagram at nova.halo.music, or by typing Nova Halo into Facebook or any search engine. Wonderful.
I think that as I was mentioning to you earlier on, there's a group of friends I've got that I really want to draw you into, because I think collectively we're going to create something extraordinary. And I think you're going to be part of this. Where we're going to go with this, I don't know, and I don't care. We're just going to go with the flow and see what happens. But Ñancy, absolutely wonderful talking to you. And I'm so delighted that the Archons ran away, because they normally do. Yes. Given enough time and enough focus, it works. So wonderful. So thank you very much. And for everybody listening in on YouTube, thank you very much as well. And just thank you very much. And for everybody else that will be watching this recording as well, thank you very much. So Ñancy, thank you very much. And thank you very much.
Anthony. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.